Muy buenas tardes, siendo las 19:26 horas, les saluda el profesor Cristian Cristóful, coordinador de lengua inglesa del Instituto Superior de Lenguas, en calidad de moderador. Se da inicio a la defensa virtual de Tesina, acorde a la resolución número 856/2023, que fija fecha y hora de la Tesina con el título Code Switching in the Classroom, a Study in Perception and Awareness, a cargo de las autoras Violeta Riveros Pozo y Liz Pamela Sanabria Jara, de la carrera de Lengua Inglesa del Instituto Superior de Lenguas, el día de hoy, jueves 27 de julio del 2023. En calidad de presidente del tribunal examinador nos acompaña la magíster Rocío Mazzoleni. Muy buenas tardes, profesora.
Buenas tardes. ¿Hablo en español o ya puedo? I can switch.
No, en español toma por ahora,
En español por ahora.
hasta que le presente a todos.
Bueno,
Bienvenida. En calidad
gracias.
de miembros del tribunal examinador están las profesoras Carolina Ortiz y la profesora Belén Migliorisi. Muy buenas tardes, profesoras.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias.
Bienvenidas. Postulantes universitarias, muy buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Muy bien. Profesora Rocío Mazzoleni, ahora usted queda en el manejo del desarrollo de la defensa.
Ok. Bueno, ustedes, las chicas, tienen para presentar, en total son 30 minutos. Por favor, corríjanme si
Sí.
son 20 minutos para presentar y 10 minutos para que nosotros tenemos para hacerles preguntas y ustedes responden, ¿verdad? Y después les vamos a pedir que se retiren un ratito mientras que nosotros les evaluamos y después les invitamos a volver para darles las notas, ¿ok?
Ok.
Entendido.
Bueno, pueden empezar ya. Les escuchamos atentamente.
Let's get this over.
Yes, all right. So, good evening, everyone. First of all, we would like to thank everybody for attending to the presentation of our research project, Code Switching in the Classroom, a study in perception and awareness. We are Violeta Riveros and Pamela Sanabria, and without further ado, we shall proceed to introduce our research project in the following section. First, we would like to start with the problem statement, which, number one, code switching is a strategy used by bilinguals in an upper elementary grade classroom at a private institute in Asunción. Number two, a student's awareness of their use of this strategy could explain how it is a valuable tool for effective communication.
Then we go to our research purpose. So our purpose was to analyze the student behavior regarding their own code switching behavior as a communication strategy. And we had three main objectives. The first one was to observe code switching behavior in the classroom. Then we also wanted to inquire about students' code switching awareness. And lastly, we wanted to compare their belief with the observed behavior.
In order to accomplish those objectives, we had a main question in mind, which was, what are the implications of a student's use of code switching in the classroom?
And then we posed three sub-research questions in order to answer that main question, which was, what are some communication strategies students use in a bilingual classroom?
Number two, how does communication differ between students and native English speakers and between students and bilingual Paraguayan speakers?
And the third one was, what are the levels of awareness of students regarding their use of this strategy in the classroom? Next, in this following section, we will expose the body of literature that provided key concepts for this work. The first one was bilingualism, which we use Garcia's definition of knowing and using two autonomous languages. For the purpose of this study, a bilingual person is someone who is able to effectively communicate using either English or Spanish. We also use Wainwright's definition of bilingualism, bilingual education, which is the use of two languages for learning and teaching in an instructional setting. This would mean that the language development happen through specific content areas that are taught in the target language through an educational program designed for this purpose. And in general, what happens is that there is a native language acquired at home and another dominant one learned for social and international purposes.
Another concept that is very important to this work is code switching, which according to Bullock and Toribio, it's the ability on the parts of bilinguals to alternate effortlessly between their two languages. Garnet Cloros also names this process as the use of several languages or dialects in the same conversation or sentence by bilingual people. Now, the reasons for code switching in bilinguals are often quite complex, and they might not be even aware that they are doing it or using it for different purposes. Now, Grosjean mentions that code switching is often used as a communication strategy to convey linguistic and social information. He also expresses, or it is also expressed, that it can be useful to reiterate what has been previously said, or when there is not a lexical equivalent in one of the languages that is used in the current conversation. Gompers has also categorized this strategy according by the functions they served in the interaction, and this includes quotations, addressee specification, reiterations, and interjections. Furthermore, Centella has also named a few categories such as footing, clarification, crutch-like code mixing, and others. Therefore, we can determine that code switching is a phenomenon that occurs where one or more people who speak more than one language get to change their codes depending on what they need to express at the moment.
And lastly, we have code mixing. This is a concept that is very related to code switching, and it can be considered as well a conversational strategy or a byproduct of being bilingual, multilingual. And we found that Guerra and Camachi define that code mixing is the intrasentential switching, whereas code switching is the intersentential switching. So we may understand that code mixing is a switching of languages within a sentence using phrases or words in different languages. And on the other hand, we have code switching that is considered to happen as a switch of languages from sentence to sentence.
That being said, code switching and code mixing can be used interchangeably in the context of this research, given that the focus of this work is not to label the switches in their grammatical context. Rather, the objective is to categorize the functions that the switches serve in the interaction, as well as to determine with whom they happen most frequently in the classroom setting. Now, in this section, we'll present the methodological processes that were carried out. Number one, we will mention the type of study, which we consider to be a mixed methods study, given that we gathered data that was both qualitative and quantitative in nature. Qualitative in forms of the descriptive behavior we observed, as well as quantitative in the forms of the recorded answers and the answers we gathered from the survey. As well with the frequency of the switches that we later on noted as well. Then we have sampling. This study was focused on one class of an upper elementary grade in a private school in Asunción. And to be precise, the population consisted of 20 students who are Spanish English speakers, one head teacher who is an English native speaker with very little understanding of Spanish, and one teacher assistant who is Paraguayan and who is a Spanish and English speaker.
Mm-hmm. And as for the data collection, as we previously stated, we conducted a survey in which we asked students about their own code switching behavior and as well as that of their peers. And then we observed 4 language art classrooms of a period of 40 minutes each. in which we audio recorded the process, but we also took notes during the observations as we saw some code switching episodes happening, and this also aid the analysis process later on. And the data analysis we carried out using two prior research that we found, and this aid the labeling process as well. The first one was Gamper's discourse analysis and also Centella's growing up bilingual Puerto Rican children in New York. We resorted to using the categories for functions in code switching that their work provided, and we use quotation, address specification, interjection, reiteration, and crutch.
Now, in this section, we shall begin showing the results of the surveys, and the answers reflect the responses of a total of 20 students. And for the purposes of this research and analysis, we have determined that responses leaning towards perceived use of code switching are always and usually, and on the other hand, responses leaning towards perceived non-use of code switching are rarely and never. Finally, sometimes is considered to be a neutral response. We also show a comparison of the responses and the observed behavior in later slides.
So the first one, this chart reflects the answer from question one, which was, in general, how often do you think you change languages, English, Spanish, when you speak? So taking the majority of responses that we have here in the always category and the usually, which always had 6 responses and usually 7, we can see that there's a trend toward perceived conscious use of code switching. And on the other hand, we can also see that no student marked the never answer, which indicates also that they use code switching at some level.
For this chart, it reflects the answers from the questions number 2, 3, and 4. How often do you switch languages with your classmates, with a head teacher, or with a teacher assistant? So the column in blue represents the answers of how often respondents believe they code switch with classmates. The one in green represents the same information but with the head teacher, and then one in red represents the code switching done with the teacher assistant. And in this comparison, it can be seen that students seem to believe their code switching behavior occurs most frequently with a teacher assistant, as reflected by the answers in the always and usually categories being more than the ones from the rest, and closely followed by the switching done with their classmates. And however, they believe that this behavior is much less frequent with the head teacher, as represented by the answers found in the rarely and never categories for this question.
Mm-hmm. And here we have the answer for question number 5, which was, are you aware that you change languages in a typical conversation? And here again, we see that the majority of responses fall in the always category and the usually, which always has 6 responses and usually 7. And also we can assume that these answers lean towards an awareness of the use of code switching in typical conversations.
And in the following graph, we show the answers from question 7. Are you aware that your classmates change languages in a typical conversation? In this question, we can also see that there is a higher percentage in the always and usually categories, always having 10 responses and usually 7 responses. This can also be seen as an indication that there is an awareness of their peers' code switching behavior.
Mm-hmm. And this following graph shows a comparison between the questions number 6 and 8. These questions were, if you or your classmates switch languages, in which situations do you think you or your classmates do it the most? So here we see that in green, we can see the answer from question number, in blue we see the question from number 6, and in green the question from number 8. And we can see that most students agree that the majority of their interactions occur with their friends and that of their peers as well, with their friends. And also we can see that the minority of code switching interactions occur with the head teacher, that of their own and that of their peers. And we also included in this question an other category in which students mention in which other occasions they use code switching, and they mentioned that That happens when they're talking to their family, when in company of an English speaker, or when speaking to a Spanish tutor.
And this table shows the data collected from the observations. We have quantified the amount of occurrences of code switching done by students, and we have also categorized these occurrences according to the function they served during the conversation. And as it can be seen, there were a total of 34 interactions, and from those, 9 were for the purposes of reiteration, 9 were for addressee specification, 7 of them were for interjections, none of them were for quotations, and 9 of such interactions were for crutches.
And this pie chart represents the percentages of interactions according to who was involved in the conversation. This is a reflection of the observations we carried out. And in blue, we can see the percentage pertinent to the code switching between students that we saw. In green, code switching between students and the head teacher. And in red, the code switching between students and the teacher assistant. So a total of 6 interactions happen between students themselves, 5 interactions happen between the student and the head teacher, and the vast majority happen between the students and the teacher assistant.
And in this chart, we can see a comparison of the previous data and as well with the data of the surveys. So what we can see is that in the column in blue, we have shown the data from the survey, which is the perceived use of code switching. And in green, we can see the data from the observations, which is what we call observed use. So for the first group, we can see that is the percentage of interactions between students. The amount of the responses indicate that there is a slight perceived use of code switching, with 55% of responses indicating that they believe they code switch most with other students. However, in contrast, well, from what we've seen, the recorded amount of interactions was only 17.6 of all occurrences. For the second group, interactions between students and the head teacher, the responses indicate that 15% of students believe that their code switch is most prominent with the head teacher. However, similarly, when compared with the observed behavior, the interaction was also very little, with only 14.7% of interactions between students and the head teacher. And finally, for the third group, interactions between students and the teacher assistant, 65% of answers point towards a perceived awareness of the use of code switching with the teacher assistant. And similarly, we observed that the code switching interactions between these two groups was of 67.6 of the times.
And this leads us to our conclusion section, where we will present the conclusions we drew from the data analysis process. First, we want to begin answering the sub-research questions that we posed at the beginning. The first one was, what are some communication strategies students use in a bilingual classroom? So as we mentioned previously, we saw that the strategies used were reiteration, crutch, and address specification and interjection, and there were no uses of quotations during the sessions we observed. So from what we observed, students mostly will resort to code switching when they wanted to emphasize their message, make up for a momentary loss of words, or when they started speaking one language with one person, but then will switch when starting talking to another person.
Then we have the question number 2. How does communication differ between students and native English speakers and between students and bilingual Paraguayan speakers? The data suggests that students tend to use code switching between bilingual Paraguayan speakers rather than with the native English speaker. So from the recorded interactions, the vast majority of code switching episodes occurred with the TA, who is a bilingual Paraguayan speaker who speaks English and Spanish, followed by interactions between students themselves, and then lastly with interactions with the head teacher. However, these two last groups were there was a major difference between both of them, and they have very little interactions in those two groups.
Mm-hmm. And the last one was, what are the levels of awareness of students regarding the use of this strategy in the classroom? So in order to answer this question, we needed both the survey and the observation, and this provided insight regarding the students' perception and awareness of their code switching use. So we concluded that they have an accurate perception and awareness regarding the use of code switching with the teacher assistant and the head teacher. However, their perception of the use of code switching with their peers was not the same as what we observed. Yet this is not something that we can say for sure, because it can happen in a different setting that is not the classroom, and other situations that we didn't observe.
Now, we can also get to answer our main research question, which was what are the implications of students' use of code switching in the classroom? So, number one, code switching can be a tool to shorten the gaps between speakers of different linguistic competence. However, this does not mean that one language interferes with the development of the other. It may simply aid communication effectively. From what we observed, students' wishes to complete their assignments or to express their ideas were far more important in the moment than the self-policing rules that they usually take in the classroom setting. Then some code switching functions are to repeat a speech previously stated, to talk to another speaker outside of the current conversation, to make up for loss of words, or to express sudden emotions or thoughts. We noted that there is a relatively equal amount of distribution between the functions that they used in the observations, and this might be an indication that they recognize that there is a lot of uses for code switching as well. This is with the exception of quotations, which again, as we mentioned before, we had not seen during the observation.
And the last one, students of this particular classroom show certain level of awareness in regards to whom they use this strategy with. And again, as we mentioned before, students reflect that in the classroom context, they believe they switch mostly with the teacher assistant, and this was confirmed by the observations we carried out. And also by the responses that they gave us in during the survey, they also indicated that they switch the least with the head teacher, and this is also something that we observed during the classroom, so this is also in alignment with the behavior that we saw. And finally, here are some implications drawn from this research project. Code switching is a bridge between the lack of knowledge, whether momentary or not, and the interaction to communicate a message. And as we previously stated, there are also functions of code switching. For example, it can be used to repeat speech previously stated, to talk to another speaker outside of the conversation, to make up for loss of words, or to express sudden emotions or thoughts. And the data from the survey and the observations also suggest that students demonstrate awareness of with whom they can switch codes in the classroom context. And the last one is one of the consequences of being immersed in a bilingual setting is being able to navigate effectively between two codes.
Finally, we would like to mention some recommendations for future research on this topic. Number one would be to expand the population scope to gather more data on the topic. This was the result of only one section of a grade in a private institution. Other age groups can yield different information. Number two, future research could replicate this study to gather data on site. This project was conducted in the aftermath of a global pandemic, which without a doubt changed or had an impact on the way we carried out this research. Originally, we intended to do it on site. However, we had to adjust to the school requirements and the current situation. Finally, to broaden the setting of the study to include break time, time spent in the cafeteria, or other facilities. As mentioned by the teachers, students tend to be less structured in any other setting that is not the classroom, so it could be interesting to gather data like that as well.
And with this, we would like to thank you for your time, and we await any questions you may have. And thank you once again for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I think now we can ask some questions, okay? I don't know if anyone wants to ask a question first or... okay, Carla, please.
Could you go back to the last slide?
The last slide. Yes, of course. Wait. This one. or the one before?
This is it. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Um, my big question is, I wonder if code switching is higher with teacher assistants because they don't give a grade to the subject.
I
Sorry, can you repeat your question, Miss? I couldn't hear it well.
I wonder. Let me see. Can you hear me better now?
yes,
Yeah,
a little bit.
I wonder if the code switching is more frequent with teacher assistants because they don't give a grade to the subject. I
It
wonder
could.
if they feel more flexible with them. They feel more at ease because there is no grade implication there. So they may be,
Certainly.
yeah,
If I remember, Pamela, you told me like in one of the situations the teacher assistant would be like, oh, no, use Spanish because we were observing the classes. Use English or something. So it's like they are a little bit more free with the teacher assistant than with they would with the head teacher. That could be another thing.
Mhm.
What we would assume is that I mean, not that what we would assume, but like we thought is that because the head teacher doesn't speak any Spanish at all, then they know that if they do switch or if they start speaking in Spanish, they're not gonna be understood. So why bother? So that could be also another thing.
And the interactions that we did see with the head teacher, and it was all we could spot that it was almost accidentally that it happened. They were meaning to talk to the teacher assistant, for example, but they ended up asking saying that to the head teacher, but it
right,
was not meant to be.
right. But
But
they would monitor themselves. They would do like a self filter, and they would again
Yeah.
replicate. So I was just that, and were you able to share these findings with the academic department of the school where you did the research? Were
Not
you
not
yet.
not yet, but I was thinking about that today that I could send that to the principal so she has the data as well. It's interesting for them as well to see how what's going on inside the school. Yes.
absolutely? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. And yes, please.
Okay, so Ms. Ortiz stole my question. So we're all thinking the same thing. What were the factors influencing that they used code switching more with the teacher assistant than with the head teacher? But I think that's been answered. But I do have another question regarding your findings and regarding the perception of the students. Regarding their use of code switching with their peers and the observed findings, why you guys think there was a difference between both, because they actually perceived that they did use code switching with their peers, right?
And that's why we included in the recommendation part that it would be interesting to do the observations inside because there is you can perceive a lot more from what you see around happening between the students talking to each other rather than some the Zoom meetings that we got to observe. So that's why we included at the end that this doesn't account in total for what they said at the beginning. It might be true. It's just that we didn't get to observe that part of the interaction because of the form that the way that we conducted the observations. Yes.
Yeah,
True.
another thing is that they were also in a different situation. They were in a hybrid situation as well. Some of them were at the school, some of them were through Zoom. So again, it is kind of different how they're gonna interact with each other. So maybe again they are thinking as well of situations outside of the
Exactly.
weird that is happening right now. So maybe they're thinking about how they used to do it back when it was normal or something like that as well.
True. Definitely makes sense. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay, just to finish, I want to ask for a clarification because I didn't understand. At the beginning, you put the definition of code switching and code mixing as something different. Some authors do use it as synonyms, other authors use it as two different things. What did you say that you consider as synonyms, or
Yes.
why did you put code mixing?
They could be synonyms, they could be something different, but like from what we found, it's more like a according to the authors that we consulted, at least it's more like a grammatical difference. One would be happening within a sentence, the other one happening from sentence to sentence. So that's why we said that it's not very significant to make a very big distinction between the two of them. So it can be called code mixing, it can be called code switching. However, throughout our work, we do use code mixing the most. Sorry, code switching the most.
Yes.
And and yeah,
Because we wanted to see the function of it, not just, we were not analyzing from the grammatical point of view. We wanted to see the function of it. And so we focused and we said that it's the same. We use them interchangeably and we ended up using code switching.
Okay.
Paper, yes.
Okay. No, just that, because both are let's say are correct, but what is your view? Do you consider as they are synonyms, or for this work in particular, or do you consider as two separate things? That was my only question. Okay, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you, Miss.
I think they can be the yes.
Hi, Miss Canese.
Hi.
Hello, with Ms. Masoleni's permission, I would like to ask one question because I
Okay.
have your written work in front of me. And I was just curious because of the number of observed interactions. I wonder how many meetings did you get to observe in total?
Four meetings, four
For
Zoom meetings,
meetings of how long?
40 minutes each.
Okay, so in total, you were able to observe only 160 minutes altogether?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just so that it's hard to also, let's say, have really, like you said, like if you do not have in-person like observations, and also because of the nature of the limitations of the of virtual communication really hinders the ability of people to engage in, let's say, more natural types of interactions, and the amount of observation that you were able to do also is, I would not, I mean, it's insufficient to really draw strong conclusions. So I really appreciated the recommendations that you mentioned at the end. So I was just curious about that because I did not, I mean, you did not include that in your method slide in terms of how many and how long. But thank you for clarifying. It's a very, really thorough work. I congratulate you on the hard work that you put into this work.
Thank you, Ms. Maseleni.
Thank you.
And I agree with you that it's not sufficient data, but since we did this after the pandemic and with the whole situation going on, it was really hard to really get access in first place to observe the classes. So I think we intended to observe more classes, I think 8 or so, but they also restrained us a little bit, and we had some specifications as to how to do it. But yes, it could be broadened, this study.
That's completely understandable. It's just that it's one of the probably main reasons why you have such discrepancy also between students' perceptions. And I mean, it could be that if you do more, you further confirm these observations because I mean, it could be that they think they do more code switching than they actually do, or it could be that they do it in other settings, like you said, like on the playground and things like that. And it could be that they do it more when there's maybe speaking Spanish and they don't know the word in Spanish and they use English. I mean, there's all kinds of variables that in different situations that could happen. But it's a very interesting study, and I thank you for doing it.
Mhm.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thanks. Okay.
Okay, so now we will invite you to leave
Bye
No
bye.
problem.
and we
Bye
will
bye.
call you back, okay?
Thank you.
And also the guest.
Yes, of course. Okay, thank you. See you in a bit.
See you. Okay. We still have some guests here.
Estamos esperando que todos salgan. O se le puede sacar también, creo.
Mhm. Okay.
Just a minute.
I hope you don't mind I stay and listen in. I won't say anything.
There she is. Okay.
Okay. Welcome. Hey, Christian, do I need to switch into Spanish?
No, no.
Ah, okay. I'm asking. My God. So, we would just want to say congratulations because um, you have been successful, and we think that the written work uh, was good, was very good. We gave you a 5, and the presentation was enjoyable, but we would have loved to hear more about your qualitative data. Okay, so that are our only or one of the things that we would like to mention. Okay, so that's why we didn't give you full points, but we thought that your presentation was very enjoyable and was a good presentation. Okay, I don't know if you want to mention to add something to what I just said, or
Mm, No, I mean, we were trying to fit in the 20 minutes. That's why we didn't include all what we had, but I agree that it could have helped more or support more our presentation.
mhm. Okay, so but anyway, congratulations. Yeah, I actually if we add both grades, you will have a you have a 5.
Thank you.
Hey. Congratulations.
Congratulations to you have finished.
We
I want
have.
We can call
congratulations both
your
of you.
colleagues.
Your work is very interesting, and of course, we would have liked to see it a lot sooner, but we are nonetheless extremely happy for you, and hopefully more will follow you on good steps to finishing their thesis and be able to get their degree. So congratulations, we're very, very happy for you.
I'm going to
Okay.
finish in Spanish now and then we can continue talking in English, okay?
Okay.
Con esto entonces damos por finalizada la defensa del día de hoy. Estamos felices con las recientes graduadas, nuestras colegas. Muchas felicidades.
Muchas
Muchas
gracias.
gracias.
Okay. Congratulations.